The rain pounded on the black umbrellas gathered over the freshly dug grave. I stood, leaning on my cane, and watched as the coffin with my Theodora's body was lowered. 67 years of life, 42 years of marriage, and now she was going into the damp earth of Ratan, and I was alone. The priest said something about eternal rest, but his words were drowned out by the sound of the rain. My fingers gripped the handle of my cane so tightly that my joints turned white. Albus and Beverly stood on the other side of the grave. My son, in a perfectly fitting suit with a neatly trimmed beard, was rubbing his cufflinks, glancing at his watch. My daughter, in a black dress that would have been more appropriate for a reception than her mother's funeral, was covering herself with an umbrella and whispering something in her husband Norris's ear. "Is that all?" I thought. "Is that all you can give your mother?" Impatient glances at the clock and whispers. I shifted my gaze to the few friends and colleagues who had come to see Theodora off on her final journey. Here's Christian Phipps, our accountant and an old friend of mine who had worked with us since the company's inception. Here was Cassandra Mulvey, the secretary who knew every little detail in our office. They cried for real. They felt the loss. When the ceremony was over, people began to disperse. Someone came up to offer condolences. I nodded, shook hands, thanked them for their kind words. I felt like I was inside a dense fog that muffled all sounds and dulled my senses. "Father, we need to go to the wake." Beverly took my arm. "You do remember that we booked a room at the Old Pine, don't you?" I remembered. It was Beverly who had insisted on having the wake at the restaurant instead of at home, as Theodora would have wanted. "There will be too many people, Father. The house will be cramped and uncomfortable." "Yes, let's go," I replied, and headed for the car. The wake passed like a blur. I sat at the head of the table, accepting condolences, listening to memories of Theodore. Albus gave a short speech, as measured as a press release, without a single lively emotion. Beverly was busy directing the waiters and making sure everyone had full glasses. At one point I noticed that my children had retreated to a corner of the room and were talking quietly but animatedly about something. Their faces were serious, and they occasionally glanced in my direction. Something in their looks made me remember Theodora's words from the week before she died. "Lawrence," she had said then, holding my hand with her gaunt fingers, "it is not death that I fear. I fear for you when I am gone. Our children, they've changed. They're not the ones we raised. Be careful with them." I tried to reassure her then, writing those words off to the effects of the medication and the pain, but now, looking at their whispering figures, I realized she'd seen something I'd been unwilling to notice for years. "Mr. Ritter," Christian Phipps crouched beside me, his eyes red with tears. "I can't find the words. Theodora was an amazing woman." "Yes, Chris, she was," I replied, grateful for the sincere sympathy. "If you need anything at all, I'm always here for you." He put his hand on my shoulder. "You know, Theodora came to my office about 3 months ago, wanting to clarify some details about the will and the company documents." I looked up. "What?" She didn't tell me anything. Christian looked confused. "I thought you knew." "She said you had discussed it." I shook my head. Theodora had kept it from me, probably not wanting to disturb me. "And what did she want to clarify?" "Mostly questions of ownership transition, options for running the company in the event of—" He hesitated. "Basically, she was worried about the future." I nodded, absorbed in my own thoughts. Theodora knew she was dying and had prepared for it more thoroughly than she'd shown me, protecting me until her last breath. When most of the guests had dispersed, Albus approached me. "Father, do you need a ride home? You look tired." "I'm fine," I replied. "I'll take my car." "Are you sure?" His voice sounded concerned, but his eyes remained cold. "Maybe you should take a couple of weeks off. Beverly and I can keep an eye on the company, that's it. Even on the day of my mother's funeral, business comes first. Thanks for your concern, son, but I can handle it. Work will get me through this time." A shadow of irritation flickered across his face, but he quickly put back the mask of sympathy. "Whatever you say, Father, but don't forget we're here to help." When I finally reached the house, the big two-story mansion on the outskirts of Raton that Theodora and I had bought 20 years ago, I was greeted by silence. I turned on the light in the hallway and froze, staring at the coat rack where Theodora's coat had always hung. It was empty now. I made my way to the living room and poured myself a whiskey. Sitting down in the chair, I let the memories flood back. 1982nd year. Theodora and I, young and enthusiastic, are opening our first tool store in downtown Raton. I have a background in construction. She has a degree in accounting and innate business acumen. Ritter Tools is a small store with ambitious plans. 1984 is the birth of Albus. Theodora is working with an infant in her arms. I'm torn between construction projects and the store. It's hard, but we're happy. 1987. Beverly shows up. By this time, we have 2 stores and we start to think about expanding our range. The 90s are a period of rapid growth. We open 3 more stores in neighboring towns, start working with large suppliers, hire staff. Albus and Beverly grow up in an atmosphere of constant labor and gradual success. I remember how proud I was when Albus first came to the store to help out on vacation. He was a quick learner, showing interest. Beverly, on the other hand, was more interested in the financial side of things, often sitting with her mother over ledgers. But something went wrong. When exactly? Maybe when we sent them off to expensive colleges, hoping to give them a better education. Or when we started expanding so aggressively that we stopped paying enough attention to them. I remembered how Albus had changed after college, back with a degree in business administration and the confidence that he knew more about business than Theodora and me. He'd suggested risky strategies, talked about venture capital and aggressive expansion. Theodora and I favored steady, organic growth. Beverly immersed herself in the world of numbers after her studies, but not like her mother. For Theodora, accounting was an honest business tool. For Beverly, it was a way to optimize and find loopholes. "That's what all modern companies do, Mom," she used to say. Gradually, a wall of misunderstanding grew between us. The kids saw our approach as outdated. We saw their methods as risking losing what we'd spent years building. 5 years ago, at a family dinner to celebrate my and Theodora's anniversary, Albus had spoken openly for the first time about a generational change in leadership. "It's time for you to rest and enjoy life," he had said then. "You've earned it. Beverly and I are ready to take the reins." Theodora looked across the table at me then, and I could see the worry in her eyes. "We're not going to retire yet," I replied then. "But your help and ideas are always welcome." Since then, the tension had only grown. Albus and Beverly showed up at the office less and less often, preferring to mind their own business. Albus started a consulting firm that was barely keeping afloat. Beverly married Norris, a stockbroker, and immersed herself in the world of financial speculation. They came over for family dinners, but the conversation always returned to business and inheritance. "When do you plan to upgrade your equipment? Have you thought about selling the South Branch? Why keep so many employees when you can automate?" 2 years ago, Theodora was diagnosed with cancer. I remember the day we walked out of the oncologist's office. She squeezed my hand and said, "Don't tell the kids how serious it is. They'll only worry." But that wasn't the point, I realized later. She didn't want them to start dividing the inheritance early. I called them that same day, informed them of the diagnosis, but downplayed the seriousness as Theodora had requested. Their response was, restrained. Beverly asked what treatment had been prescribed and if insurance covered it. Albus offered the contacts of an excellent medical law lawyer. For the last year of Theodora's life, they visited once a month, no more. Always in a hurry, always with gifts that showed more their status than an understanding of what a dying mother needed. Expensive but useless things. As I sat there, immersed in my memories, the phone rang. It was past midnight. "Yes?" I answered it. "Lawrence, it's Christian." My accountant's voice sounded worried. "I'm sorry for the late call, but I had to tell you. Today after the wake, Albus came up to me and started questioning me about the state of the company, about the documents, about who had signing authority." I straightened up in my chair. "And what did you tell him?" "Only what any employee knows." "But Lawrence, it was strange, like he was doing reconnaissance." "Thanks for telling me, Chris. Also, I may be out of line, but remember that conversation you had with Theodora about the documents? She told me to give you something if, well, when that happens." "What is it?" "The papers. She said you'd understand. Can you stop by my office tomorrow?" "I'll be there at 10, I answered and hung up. I sat in the silence of the house, and for the first time in years I faced the truth. My children had waited for Theodora to die so they could gain control of the company. And now that she was gone, they weren't going to wait much longer. I got up and walked over to the window. The rain was still falling, drumming on the glass. The reflection of an elderly man with a tired face stared back at me out of the darkness. A man who had just buried the love of his life and now realized he had to prepare for war with his own children. "You were right, Theodora," I thought. "You always saw through people better than I did." I made my decision. If Albus and Beverly want an inheritance war, they'll have it. But on my terms. I will protect what Theodora and I have created, no matter what it takes. Tomorrow I'll stop by Christian's and find out what Theodora left for me, and then I'll start preparing for a battle my children don't even know about. The morning after the funeral greeted me with a headache. I woke up in the living room chair where I'd fallen into a heavy sleep the night before. There was an unfinished bottle of whiskey on the table, not the best way to deal with grief, but the only way I'd found yesterday. I struggled to get up, feeling my knees aching. 67 is not an age when you can sleep in a chair with impunity. In the bathroom mirror reflected my drained face with red eyes and disheveled gray hair. I looked like a man who had lost everything. Perhaps that was the case. After a shower and 2 headache pills, I felt a little better. Enough to pack up and drive to Christian Phipps's office to find out what Theodora had left for me. Christian's office was in the same building as the Ritter Tulsa headquarters, a small 2-story structure in the business section of Raton. We'd bought it 10 years ago, when the company had grown enough to afford its own building. Christian was waiting for me. When I walked in, he got up from his desk and gave me a big hug, not the kind of handshake that business partners shake, but the hug of an old friend. "How are you, Lawrence?" he asked, pulling back and looking me carefully in the eye. "How can a man who buried his wife yesterday be?" I replied, sinking into the chair across from his desk. Christian nodded and opened the safe in the corner of the office. A moment later, he placed a sealed envelope in front of me. "Theodora left this with me 2 months ago," he said. "She asked me to give it to you, afterward." I took the envelope. Theodora's handwriting said, "To Lawrence when I am gone. I'll leave you to it." Christian walked tactfully out of the office, closing the door behind him. I stared at the envelope for a moment, hesitant to open it. Then I took a deep breath and broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a flash drive. I unfolded the piece of paper and saw my wife's neat handwriting. "My dear Lawrence, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer around. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. Know that every day with you was a gift to me. It's hard for me to write this, but I have to warn you. For the past 6 months, I've been noticing strange things. Albus and Beverly have been seeing Edwin Thorne a lot. You remember this lawyer. He helped Norris with his investment cases. I overheard part of their conversation once. They were discussing our will and the ownership structure of the company. On the flash drive, you'll find copies of all the important company documents, our personal wills, and a few other things that might come in handy. I've also made copies of our financial statements for the last 5 years. Lawrence, I know you've always believed in the best in people, especially our children, but I'm asking you to be careful. Protect what we've spent a lifetime building. I love you. Always have and always will. Yours, Theodora. I reread the letter twice, feeling a cold resolve growing inside. Then I plugged the flash drive into Christian's computer. I spent 2 hours studying the documents Theodora had collected. She was always meticulous about detail, and now that trait could save everything we'd created. I was particularly interested in the legal documents concerning the ownership of the company. It turned out that although Theodora and I were technically equal owners, there were certain conditions under which full control passed to the remaining spouse for a full year after the death of one of us. That gave me time. When Christian returned, I had already mapped out a plan of action. "Chris, I need your help," I said, "and complete confidentiality." He sat down across from me and nodded gravely. "Whatever you need, Lawrence." I told him my suspicions and what I planned to do. As I told him, his eyebrows rose higher and higher. "It's risky," he said when I was finished. "And maybe not quite legal," I finished for him. "I know, but the alternative is to let them ruin my and Theodora's life's work. I didn't work for 40 years without a day off to see my kids blow it all to smithereens." Christian rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "If you do everything neatly, technically, you're entitled to most of these actions as a majority shareholder. The question is how to formalize it." "That's why I need your help," I said. "And one more thing. Do you know a good lawyer? Not from Rayton. And definitely not Edwin Thorne." "There's a woman in Porterville," Christian nodded. "Pamela Hughes. She specializes in corporate law. Very good and, more importantly, totally confidential." "Arrange a meeting," I asked, standing up. "Now I have to get to the office." Ritter Tulsa's head office occupied the entire first floor of the building. When I entered through the main door, Cassandra Mulvey, our secretary, greeted me with a look of genuine sympathy on her face. "Mr. Ritter, we weren't expecting you so soon," she said, rising from her desk. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Cassandra," I smiled weakly. "Work is the best cure for grief, as Theodora used to say." She nodded, but there was worry in her eyes. "Your son is already here," she said quietly. "He arrived an hour ago and is now in your office. He's going through some documents." I felt my muscles tense up. "Oh yeah? Well, I'll go say hello." My office was at the far end of the hallway. The door was ajar and I heard Albus's voice before I entered. "Yes, I understand the timeline." He was on the phone. "No, the will hasn't been officially announced yet, but that's a formality. Yes, I'm sure my sister and I will be the main heirs. Dad's old enough not to have to run a business. We'll take care of him." I opened the door quietly. Albus was sitting at my desk, going through papers from the top drawer. When he saw me, he flinched and quickly ended the conversation. "Father." He stood up, trying to keep his composure. "I wasn't expecting you today. I thought you would take a few days off." "As you see, I prefer to work," I replied, approaching the table. "What are you looking for in my papers?" He made a guilty face. "I just wanted to go through the latest reports to keep up to date. Thought I'd help you with your current cases while you recover." "That's very thoughtful." I sat down across from him, looking at my son carefully. "And who were you talking to on the phone?" Albus hesitated for a moment. "It's a business associate. Nothing important." "A business associate you're telling about our family will?" Irritation flashed across his face, quickly replaced by a concerned expression. "Father, you misunderstand. I was just discussing some formalities. There are a lot of legal matters to take care of after Mom's death. I wanted to save you the trouble. Thank you for your concern, but I'm quite capable of handling the legal matters myself." I held out my hand. "Now, if you don't mind, I have some work to do." He paused, then reluctantly got up from the table. "Of course, Father. I'm just worried about you. Beverly and I are both worried." "I appreciate that," I replied in an even voice. "By the way, where's Beverly?" "She should be here this afternoon. She wanted to discuss some financial matters with you." "I'll be waiting." I nodded. When the door closed behind Albus, I quickly checked my desk drawers. As I'd suspected, some of the documents were out of place. In particular, the folder containing the contracts of our key suppliers was clearly overlooked. I leaned back in my chair, contemplating the situation. They were acting faster than I had anticipated. We needed to accelerate our own plans. I spent the rest of the morning pretending to do my usual work while compiling a list of people I needed to speak to in confidence. Key employees, major customers, suppliers. They all needed to be prepared for the coming changes, but in a way that the information wouldn't reach my children before the time was up. After lunch, just as Albus had promised, Beverly showed up. She entered my office without knocking, dressed in an immaculate business suit, a folder of documents in her hands. "Father." She leaned over and kissed me dryly on the cheek. "How are you holding up?" "I'm doing okay," I answered briefly. "Did you want to discuss financial matters?" Beverly sat down across from me and opened the folder. "Yes, there are a few things that need attention. I've been going over the latest reports and I've found some inefficiencies in the company's structure." She spent the next half hour talking about optimizing staff, restructuring debt, and bringing in outside investors. In essence, she was proposing to cut half the staff, sell off some of the assets, and raise venture capital, all the things Theodore and I had always opposed. I listened, nodding in all the right places, but inside I could feel the anger rising. They hadn't even waited for Theodora's body to cool, and they were already planning to destroy what we'd spent decades building. "Those are interesting suggestions, Beverly," I said when she was done. "I'll consider them. But now is not the best time to make any sudden changes. The company is stable, profitable, and we have a good reputation in the region." "Stability is a good thing, Father," she pressed forward. "But the world is changing. If we don't adapt, we risk falling behind the competition." "Your mother and I have always believed in incremental change," I replied, "and that strategy has worked for the last 40 years. A look appeared on her face that I knew well, the same one she'd had at 15, when she'd thought her parents were woefully behind the curve. "Father, I realize it's hard for you to think about the future right now. That's why Albus and I are ready to take on more responsibility. You could step back, concentrate on yourself. We'll take care of the company. Thank you for the offer." I looked her straight in the eye. "But Ritter Tulsa is my life's work, and I'm not going to walk away from it." Beverly looked disappointed, but quickly pulled herself together. "Of course, Father. I was only suggesting it. Anyway, just think about my ideas, okay?" After she left, I dialed Christian's number. "Any luck with Pamela Hughes?" "Yeah, she's expecting us tomorrow at 10 o'clock at her office in Porterville." "Oh, that's great. One more thing. I need a list of all our major assets, contracts, and client bases. And Chris, don't say a word to anyone." That evening, after the office emptied, I invited Vince McCoy, our sales manager, to a local bar, an unremarkable place on the edge of town where we were unlikely to be recognized. Vince had been with us for 15 years and was one of our most loyal employees. He had come to the company as a young man with no experience, and Theodora and I had practically raised him as an expert. "Mr. Ritter," he shook my hand as we met at the entrance. "Again, my condolences." "Thank you, Vince. And please, just Lawrence tonight." We took a table in the far corner. After a couple minutes of generalities, I got down to business. "Vince, tell me honestly, how long do you plan to stay at Ritter Tulsa?" He looked surprised by the question. I hadn't thought about leaving, Mr. Lawrence. I like my job, and I'm grateful for all the opportunities you and Mrs. Ritter have given me." What if the company changes? I asked. If new management comes in with new ideas, like, say, plans to downsize, to change the working conditions? Vince frowned. Are you planning to sell the company? No, I shook my head. But things could change. My children have their own ideas about how a business should be run. He nodded understandingly. I've heard some of their ideas. Frankly, they worry me, especially the talk of downsizing. Me too, I leaned closer. Vince, I have a suggestion. But before I make it, I need your word that this conversation will stay between us. Of course, he said seriously. You can trust me. I'm planning to start a new company, I said quietly, and I want you to join me. Take the best people in your department with you. His eyes widened in surprise. A new company? But what about Ritter Tulsa? Ritter Tulsa may not be what it was under Theodore and me anytime soon, I answered. I can't stop it. But I can create something new, with people who share Theodora's and my values. Vince thought for a moment, then nodded. I'm with you, Lawrence, and I think many of ours will be too. The team loved you and Mrs. Ritter. For many, this is more than just a job. Good, I was relieved. But we have to tread carefully. Don't tell anyone yet. I'll contact you when the time is right. Over the next few days, I held a series of similar meetings with department heads, with key specialists, with our major clients. I spoke in hints, never revealing the full picture, but making it clear that change was coming and that I would value their loyalty. In parallel with Christian and Pamela Hughes, we were developing a legal strategy. It was essential to operate within the law, but to exploit every possible loophole. We set up 2 shell companies through which we began to gradually remove Ritter Tulsa's assets. Not physical assets like buildings or equipment, they would have been noticed immediately, but intangible assets, contracts, client bases, intellectual property. I paid special attention to accounting. Together with Christian, we created a number of fictitious debts and liabilities that looked legitimate on paper, but were actually a way to make the company less attractive to the potential investors I was sure Albus and Beverly would try to attract. We had also entered into several long-term contracts with suppliers on unfavorable terms, contracts that contained hidden clauses that would allow them to be renegotiated if the new company was formed. The kids, meanwhile, were getting more and more persistent. They showed up at the office almost daily, asking questions of the staff, examining documents. I pretended not to notice their activity, continuing my clandestine work. 2 weeks after Theodora's funeral, Pamela Hughes announced that the legal structure for the new company was ready. We named it T&L Instruments, in honor of Theodora and me. All the necessary documents were prepared, accounts were opened, and trademarks were registered. That same evening, I met with Vince and the other key employees at the same bar on the outskirts of town. This time, I gave them more details of my plan. In a month, T&L Instruments will officially launch, I said. I want you all to tender your resignations from Ritter Tools on the same day I announce the new company. That will create a surprise effect. What about the customers? Vince asked. Many of them have been with Ritter Tulsa for years. I've already talked to the major ones, I said. Most of them have agreed to come to us, especially when they found out you'd all be with the new company. Reputation and relationships mean more than a company name. We discussed the details, assigning responsibilities. Everyone there took responsibility for some aspect of the transition. The atmosphere was electrified with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. After all, it's not every day you take part in such a risky venture. One last thing, I said before we parted ways. Absolute secrecy. Not a word to anyone not in this room, especially not to my children or their entourage. The next day, Albus and Beverly appeared in my office together, an unusual sight considering they usually preferred to act separately. Father, we need to have a serious talk, Albus began, sitting down across from me. I'm listening, I replied, setting aside the papers I was working on. Beverly and I have discussed the situation, he continued. It's been almost 3 weeks since Mom's funeral. We think it's time to begin the process of transferring control of the company. Transfer of control? I raised my eyebrows. To who? Us, of course, Beverly interjected. Dad, you can't run a company forever. You're 67. It's a hard job, especially now that you're alone. And you don't think I'm up to it? It's not that. Albus made a conciliatory gesture. We just want you to rest, to recover from loss. We'll take care of the day-to-day. You'll remain chairman of the board, you'll still make a profit, but you won't be burdened with the daily grind. I looked at them, feeling a mixture of bitterness and determination. They didn't even try to hide their true motives. To them, this was just business, not their parents' life's work. I appreciate your concern, I said finally, but I'm not ready to step away from the business yet. Maybe in a few months. Beverly cast a quick glance at Albus, who nodded faintly. Okay, Father, she said with a strained smile. We understand. But perhaps you could at least consider outside investors? We have some very interested partners who are willing to invest heavily in expanding the company. Investors? I acted surprised. Which ones? A group of venture capitalists from Chicago, Albus answered. They specialize in modernizing family businesses. They can offer good terms. I nodded slowly, pretending to think about it. Send me their contacts. I'll look into it. When they left, I contacted Pamela Hughes. We need to speed things up, I said. They are already talking to investors. It's almost done, she replied. Another week and we can launch T&L Instruments. Good, I thought for a moment. One more thing. Prepare the documents for the transfer of control of Ritter Tulsa. I think I'm going to need them soon. Over the next week, I finalized the arrangements. Assets were transferred. Key employees were ready for transition. Clients were alerted. The hardest part remained, the moment of revealing the cards. I knew Albus and Beverly wouldn't back down. They wanted the company and were willing to use any means necessary. Well, I had a surprise they wouldn't soon forget. Exactly 1 month after Theodora's funeral, everything was ready. T&L Instruments existed on paper, with a rented office in Porterville, 30 kilometers from Raton. Key employees had prepared resignation letters, and key clients had been alerted to the imminent change. All we had to do was wait for the right moment. I didn't think it would come so soon. It was a Friday night. I came home after a day of work feeling a strange mixture of fatigue and excitement. The last few weeks had been exhausting, pretending it was business as usual while secretly setting the stage for new company. The kids, meanwhile, were getting more and more insistent in their attempts to take control of Ritter Tulsa. I was just about to prepare dinner when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw Albus, Beverly, and an unfamiliar middle-aged man in an austere suit. Father, Albus began without greeting, we need to talk. This is Edwin Thorne, our lawyer. I stepped back silently, letting them into the house. Something in their faces, a mixture of determination and barely contained triumph, suggested to me that the moment had arrived. To what do I owe the visit? I asked as we settled into the living room. Beverly and Albus sat across from me, Thorne in a chair off to the side, as if he wanted to watch us all at once. Father, Beverly began in a businesslike tone, it's been a month since Mom's funeral. We've given you time to recover, but now we need to deal with the inheritance and the running of the company. The inheritance issue? I raised an eyebrow. I thought the will was clear. Theodora left her share of the company to me. Edwin Thorne cleared his throat and entered the conversation. Mr. Ritter, technically, that is true. However, there are certain circumstances that we would like to discuss. He opened a leather briefcase and pulled out several documents. First, we have reason to believe that Mrs. Ritter was under significant medication during the last months of her life, which may have affected her decisions regarding the will. I felt anger boiling up inside, but I kept my composure. Are you implying that my dying wife was incapacitated? No, no, Thorne said hastily. It's just that her condition may have affected her judgment. In addition, he pulled out another document. We have evidence that your psychological state after her death was a matter of concern. Evidence? I looked at the children. What kind of evidence? Albus leaned forward. Father, don't take it personally. We're worried about you. Your behavior lately has been erratic. You've been working overtime, holding secret meetings with your staff, avoiding us. Those are signs of instability? I couldn't contain my sarcasm. There's more to it than that, Beverly interjected. Mr. Phipps told us about the strange instructions you've been giving in accounting, and several clients have complained about your cryptic hints about impending changes in the company, so that's how they found out. Christian would never betray me, but perhaps one of the junior accountants noticed the unusual transactions and informed the kids. As for the clients, I was careful, but apparently not careful enough. What's your point? I asked bluntly, looking at Thorne. The lawyer put another document on the table. Mr. Ritter, your children are deeply concerned about your condition and believe that after the tragic loss of your wife, you need time to recover. They suggest that you temporarily turn over management of the company to them while you recover. And if I refuse? Thorne exchanged glances with my children, then continued. In that case, we will be forced to go to court to assess your capacity and appoint interim asset managers. The process could be unpleasant and public. Here it is, the threat I was expecting. They were willing to make me look like an incompetent old man just to get control of the company. Father, Beverly tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. We don't want to go to trial. It would be hard on all of us, especially you. Just sign the temporary transfer of control papers and we can move on. You'll stay on the board, you'll get a full share of the profits. And the house, Albus added abruptly. We think you should move into something more suitable for one person. This house is too big and full of memories of your mother. You'll feel better in a new place. I looked at him in disbelief. You want me to give you the house too? Not give it to you, he corrected. Just hand over the management. The house officially belonged to my mother, and by inheritance it should be divided among the heirs. That is, between the two of you and me, I clarified. Technically, yes, Albus nodded. But it would be easier for one of us in our family to live here than it would be for you alone. Beverly's already looked at a great apartment for you in the new senior complex. For seniors, I repeated slowly. You want to send me to a nursing home? It's not a nursing home, Beverly said indignantly. It's a modern complex with services for the elderly. It has everything you need: medical staff, entertainment, companionship. I looked at my children and didn't recognize them. When did they turn into these calculating, cold people? Where were the little Albus and Beverly that Theodora and I had taught honesty and compassion? Let me get this straight, I said, straightening up in my chair. You've come here to take my company, my house, and send me to an institution to live out my life. And if I don't agree, you're going to charge me with incompetence and take me to court anyway. Am I understanding this correctly? Thorne looked slightly concerned at my bluntness, but Albus remained calm. You're being dramatic, Father. We're offering a reasonable solution that will allow you to rest and recover, and for us to continue to grow the business you and Mom have built. I leaned back in my chair and looked at them carefully. All the cards were laid out on the table. It was time to make a move. Okay, I said, to their apparent surprise. Give me your papers. I'll sign it. You will? Beverly couldn't hide her amazement. Just like that? What did you expect? I shrugged. A scandal. Resistance. I'm an old man who just lost his wife. I don't have the strength to fight my own children. Thorne, clearly not expecting such an easy victory, quickly spread some documents on the table. Here is the agreement on the transfer of management of the company. Here, about the house, and this, the agreement on your maintenance. He handed me a pen. I took the documents and began to scrutinize them. Thorne looked nervous. Perhaps he was afraid that I might discover some legal tricks. But I wasn't looking for any tricks. I was just stalling for time, watching the expressions on my children's faces. Beverly could barely hide her glee. Albus kept a businesslike look, but there was a triumphant light in his eyes. They were already counting their victory. "When do you want me to vacate the house?" I asked, signing the first document. "There's no need to rush," Albus answered. "Say 2 weeks. That's enough time to pack up and move my things to the new apartment. Beverly will help with the organization." I nodded and signed the second document, then the third. "As for the company," Albus continued, already more relaxed, "we'd like you to hand things over as soon as possible. We have meetings scheduled with investors next week." "Investors?" I looked up from the papers. "You've already found buyers for the company?" "Not buyers," Beverly corrected, "strategic partners. A group from Chicago is ready to invest heavily in expansion and modernization." "I see." I put the signed documents on the table. "Well, congratulations. Ritter Tulsa and the house are now yours." Thorne quickly checked the signatures and nodded to the children. Albus couldn't hold back a smile. "You made the right decision, Father. You'll feel better once you get a break from all this worry." "I guess." I stood up. "I need a few days to get my personal things out of the office. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not." Beverly stood up as well. "Take all the time you need. We don't want to put any extra stress on you." What a concern. Now that they had gotten what they wanted, it was okay to be generous. "And also," I added, "I'd like to say goodbye to the employees in person. Many of them have worked with me for decades." "Of course," Albus nodded. "We'll organize a small ceremony on Monday. You'll be able to give a farewell speech." Thorne gathered the papers into his briefcase and they headed for the exit. At the door, Beverly turned around. "Father, aren't you mad at us? We're doing this for your own good." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, Beverly, I'm not mad. In fact, I'm grateful to you." "Grateful?" She looked surprised. "Yes," I smiled weakly. "You've cleared up a lot of things for me today." She seemed to want to ask something, but decided not to pursue the subject. "We'll stop by on Sunday to see how you're doing with the move," Albus said, already standing on the doorstep. "Don't worry," I replied. "I have everything under control." When the door closed behind them, I went back into the living room and poured myself a whiskey. Instead of anger or disappointment, I felt a strange relief. Everything was clear now. The kids had gotten what they wanted and had fully revealed their cards, and I could act openly. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Christian. "They came by," I said without preamble, "with a lawyer. They threatened to declare me incompetent if I didn't hand over the company and the house." "And what did you do?" Christian sounded worried. "Signed everything they brought," I answered. "Ritter Tulsa is now officially theirs." "Lawrence," he began, but I interrupted. "Everything's going according to plan, Chris. Get in touch with Vince and the others. Tell them the operation starts Monday." "Are you sure? We could wait another week, prepare better." "No," I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "They've already made arrangements with the investors. If we wait, it might be too late. T&L Instruments officially opens on Monday and Ritter Tools is getting mass layoffs." "Okay," he agreed after a pause. "I'll notify everyone. But what about the house? Are they really kicking you out?" "Yes," I grinned bitterly. "They found me a place in a senior center, with nurses and entertainment." "Bastards," Christian said, which was unusual for his usually reserved tone. "You can stay with me until you find a new place." "Thanks, man, but I've already arranged a rental apartment in Porterville near the new office. I'll be closer to work." After talking to Christian, I called Pamela Hughes to update her on the news and finalize the latest legal details. I then contacted Vince McCoy and the rest of the key staff, confirming the start of the operation. Finishing my calls, I went up to the second floor to Theodora and I's bedroom. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at her picture on the bedside table. "You were right about the kids," I said quietly. "They're not the ones we raised. But don't worry, I won't let them ruin what we've created." Over the weekend, I started packing, not for a move to a nursing home, but for a new life in Porterville. I took only the essentials and personal memorabilia, furniture, appliances, everything else I decided to leave behind. Let them take the house with all its contents. I would create a new home from scratch. On Sunday, as promised, Albus and Beverly arrived. They were surprised to see only a few packed boxes. "Father, you've packed almost nothing," Beverly remarked with concern. "Do you need any help?" "No," I answered. "I'm only taking personal items. I leave the rest to you." "But your clothes, books, dishes," Albus began. "I don't need much," I interrupted. "It'll be easier to start fresh in a new place." They exchanged glances, probably thinking I'd fallen into some sort of senile eccentricity. So much the better. Let them underestimate me. "Speaking of the new place," Beverly said, "I've arranged for a showing tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I can take you there after you say goodbye to the office." "Goodbye to the office." "No need to worry," I replied. "I already have an arrangement for the place." "Really?" Albus frowned. "Where?" "In another city." I was deliberately vague. "I want a fresh start, away from the memories." "But father," Beverly objected, "how are we going to visit you? And what about your doctors, your friends?" "Don't worry," I smiled. "I can take care of myself, and I can always come to Rattan if I want to see someone." They exchanged glances again, this time concerned. Perhaps they were beginning to suspect that something was wrong. But it was too late. The papers were signed, the plans set in motion. "Oh, I almost forgot," Albus said before leaving. "The investors and I will be at the office tomorrow at 11. They want to tour the premises and meet the key staff. Why don't you come along? Tell them about the history of the company, introduce the team." I could barely contain my smile. They had no idea what awaited them tomorrow. "Sure," I replied. "I'd be happy to help with the transition." When they left, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to everyone in our plan. "Tomorrow at 10, all according to plan." Then I sat back in my chair with a glass of whiskey and felt real satisfaction for the first time in a month. Tomorrow my children will understand what it means to betray a family. Tomorrow they would learn that the old wolf was still capable of showing his teeth. I raised my glass in a silent toast, looking at Theodora's picture. "To new beginnings, my dear. And here's to the lessons you sometimes have to teach your own children." Monday started earlier than usual for me. I arrived at the Ritter Tulsa office at 8:30, an hour and a half before the meeting with the investors. I needed to make sure everything was ready for today. The first person I met was Vince McCoy. He was waiting for me at the entrance, nervously shuffling from foot to foot. "Good morning, Lawrence," he said, shaking my hand. "Everything's ready. 27 resignations are on the tables. As soon as you give the signal, we'll file them officially." "That's great, Vince," I patted him on the shoulder. "And our clients?" 16 of our biggest ones have confirmed they're coming to us. That's almost 70% of our turnover. The rest are hesitant, but I think they'll follow the majority when they see the results. I nodded. We entered the building and went up to my office. Christian was already waiting there with a folder of documents. "Lawrence," he handed me the folder, "here's everything you might need today. Copies of contracts, reports with deliberate errors, a list of fictitious commitments. And one more thing," Pamela called. "T&L Instruments is all set to go live. The Porterville office is waiting for employees." "Thanks, Chris." I took the folder. "How long do you think it will take them to realize the magnitude of the problems?" Christian grinned. "If your Albus is half as smart as he thinks he is, 2 days. Beverly will figure it out faster. She's got a nose for financial details. But they wouldn't see the full picture until a week from now, at the earliest." Vince looked at his watch. "It's almost 9. People are starting to gather. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath and nodded. Ready. Time for the show to begin. By 9:30, all the key personnel were gathered in the conference room. I looked around the room. These people had worked with me for years, some for decades, and today they were risking their careers to follow me. Friends, I began, today is a special day. Today is the day that Ritter Tulsa changes ownership. Officially, the company is now owned by my children, Albus and Beverly. I paused. But the true soul of the company is you. It is you who have made Ritter Tools what it has been all these years. And today, I'm offering you a choice. Stay here with the new owners or join me in a new venture, T&L Instruments. A whisper ran through the room, even though most of those present already knew the plan. I won't sugarcoat it, I continued. It's a risk. We're starting from scratch, but we have the knowledge, the experience, and most importantly, the trust of our customers. Those who choose to join me, the resignations are on your desks. Submit them at 10 sharp when I begin my farewell speech to Albus, Beverly, and their investors. Cassandra Mulvey, our secretary, raised her hand. What about those who didn't know about the plan until today? The decision is yours, I replied. No pressure. Those who want to stay, stay. But be aware that the new owners are planning major changes. Downsizing, retooling, maybe even selling some divisions. At 10 o'clock sharp, Albus and Beverly arrived at the office, accompanied by 3 men in expensive suits, obviously investors from Chicago. They looked confident and pleased with themselves as they entered the conference room where the staff had gathered. Good morning, everyone, Albus began, standing at the head of the table. As many of you already know, as of today, my sister and I are taking over the management of Ritter Tulsa. We are grateful to our father for all he has done in creating and growing this business, and we look forward to taking the company to new heights. Beverly stood beside him, smiling at the employees. The investors sat off to the side, looking around at the attendees appraisingly. Before we begin discussing the future of the company, Albus continued, I'd like to give my father the floor for a farewell speech. He gestured for me to come to the table. I rose slowly and walked over to him, feeling the stares of everyone present. Thank you, Albus, I began. 40 years ago, Theodora and I opened a small tool store in the center of Rayton. We had nothing but a dream and a willingness to work day and night. Over the years, Ritter Tools has grown into a company that I'm really proud of. But it's not about buildings or contracts or even profits. It's about the people. I looked around the room. It's about each and every one of you. At that moment, the conference room door opened and Cassandra walked in with a stack of papers in her hands. She walked over to Beverly and held out the papers to her. What are these? Beverly asked, frowning. Dismissals, Miss Ritter, Cassandra replied in an official tone. 27 resignations from employees, including me. Beverly's face changed from bewilderment to dismay. She flipped through the papers quickly, then turned to Albus, who still didn't understand what was going on. 27 dismissals? Today? His voice trembled. But why? I spoke again, drawing everyone's attention. Because a new company, T&L Instruments, is starting up today, and these 27 employees have decided to join me. Albus stared at me, his face slowly turning red. What? You're starting a rival company? That's right, I nodded. And by the way, 16 of our biggest clients have already confirmed that they're switching to us. One of the investors rose from his seat. Mr. Ritter Jr., what's going on here? Albus looked completely lost, shifting his gaze from me to Beverly, who was frantically going through the applications. I don't know, he mumbled. Dad, you can't do this. It's sabotage. It's nothing like that, I shook my head. I'm just starting a new company. Every employee has the right to choose where to work. Every customer is free to decide who to do business with. Nothing illegal. Beverly suddenly turned pale as she looked over the list of people who were quitting. Vince McCoy, Christian Phipps, Cassandra Mulvey, Thomas Duran. Those are all our key employees. That's right, I confirmed. And they all chose to continue working with me rather than you. Amazing, isn't it? The investors began to talk amongst themselves, clearly concerned. One of them, the oldest, approached Albus. We need to talk. Now. They retreated to a corner of the hall where they began to discuss the situation heatedly. Beverly rushed over to them, leaving the statements on the table. I turned to the staff. All those who have decided to join T&L Instruments, I expect to see you in an hour at the new office in Porterville. You know the address. Then I looked at the others. And for those who have decided to stay, good luck. You'll need it. With those words, I headed for the exit. As I passed Albus, Beverly, and the investors, Albus grabbed my arm. Father, you can't just leave. What are we going to do about the company? I released my hand and looked him in the eye. You wanted the company. You got it. With all the consequences. That same day, the T&L Instruments office in Porterville went into business. 27 former Ritter Tools employees were settling in, installing equipment, setting up systems. The atmosphere was electrifying, a mixture of excitement, uncertainty, and excitement. I walked around the office, talking to everyone, thanking them for their trust and support. Many admitted that they had never seen me so animated and energetic. Perhaps they were right. I felt energized, as if I'd lifted a heavy weight off my shoulders. Vince came to me with the phone in his hand. Lawrence, Anderson Construction called. They want to come to us, but they're worried about continuity of supply. Tell them we'll make sure everything is on time, I replied. We already have agreements with suppliers, and offer them a discount on their first order as a thank you for their trust. All day long, the phones were ringing off the hook with calls from customers, suppliers, even employees who had originally decided to stay with Ritter Tulsa, but now, seeing the mass exodus, were considering a move. By the evening, I was exhausted but satisfied. The first day of the new company had gone more successfully than I had expected. Christian and I stayed late in the office discussing details and planning the next steps. Do you think they have realized the extent of the problem yet? Christian asked, leaning back in his chair. They're just getting started, I replied. The loss of staff and customers is just the tip of the iceberg. Wait until they discover all the surprises in the contracts and accounting. As if to confirm my words, my cell phone rang. Beverly's name popped up on the screen. Should I answer it? I looked at Christian. He shrugged. They're your kids. It's up to you. I took the call and put the phone on speaker. Yes, Beverly? Father. Her voice sounded strained. We need to talk. Now. I'm listening, I answered calmly. Not on the phone. Come to the office. Our office, she emphasized the last words. It's late, Beverly, and I have a lot of work to do. If you want to talk, come to Porterville tomorrow. Porterville? She hesitated. So that's where you started your company? That's right. Father, her voice became almost pleading. Do you realize what you've done? The investors withdrew their offer. They said they wouldn't invest in a company that had just lost its core staff and customer base. What a shame. I didn't hide my sarcasm. So what are you going to do? That's exactly what I want to talk about. She sounded hysterical. You have to fix this. Convince the staff to come back. Get the customers back. I'm afraid that's impossible, I interrupted. They've made their choice, just like you and Albus. There was a pause. Then Beverly spoke in a different tone, cold and calculating. You know, Father, what you've done could very well be considered unfair competition, poaching staff, customers. We could sue. Christian tensed, but I just smiled. Try. I have all the paperwork in order. Every employee left of their own accord. Every customer made the decision to change suppliers. Good luck in court. What about accounting? Her voice is even colder. We found some strange discrepancies in the reports, fictitious debts, questionable contracts. It's not just unfair competition anymore, Father. It could be considered fraud. Maybe, I agreed. But who signed all these documents? Who's been the CEO of the company for the last 40 years? IA. And if you decide to dig in that direction, all the dirt will come out on me. But you own the company now. You're responsible for everything that happens in it, including any irregularities that may be discovered. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Beverly said quietly, but clearly, "You planned this whole thing. From the beginning. You deliberately ruined the company before you handed it over to us." "Bravo, Beverly," I was pleased. "You've always been smart." "But why?" Her voice trembled. "Why destroy what you and Mom had spent a lifetime building?" "I didn't destroy anything," I countered. "I kept the essence of the company people, customers, knowledge, traditions, just under a new name, and you and Albus got an empty shell. Exactly what you deserve." "We're your children," she exclaimed. "The children who abandoned me at my mother's funeral." My voice became harsh. "The children who couldn't wait until her body was cold to start dividing the inheritance. The kids who threatened to declare me incompetent and send me to a nursing home if I didn't give them everything I had." Muffled sobs were heard on the other end of the line. I felt a prick of pity, but quickly suppressed it. "Listen, Beverly," I said more gently. "What's done is done. You still have a company. Maybe not as successful as it used to be, but with potential. Now it's up to you whether you can rebuild it or not." "We can't do it," she whispered. "Not without key personnel, not without customers, not with these debts." "Then learn to cope," I replied firmly. "Or sell what's left and start something of your own. Either way, it's not my problem anymore." I ended the call and looked at Christian. He shook his head. "Tough." "They deserved it," I replied, but I felt a strange emptiness inside. Revenge didn't bring the satisfaction I'd hoped for. The next few days were filled with work. T&L Instruments was rapidly gaining momentum. We rented a warehouse, signed new contracts with suppliers, and revamped our product line. Thanks to the reputation and relationships we had carried over from Ritter Tools, the company quickly got back on its feet. Meanwhile, the situation at Ritter Tulsa was becoming increasingly dire. Through confidants, I was getting information about what was going on there. Albus and Beverly were trying to save the company, but every day brought new problems. First, they discovered that many of the contracts with suppliers contained unfavorable terms that I had secretly negotiated in the final weeks before handing over control. Then fictitious debts to shell companies that Christian and I had set up specifically for this purpose surfaced. And when they tried to get a loan to cover cash flow gaps, the banks turned them down because of the company's troubled credit history. Another gift from me. A week later, something I was particularly looking forward to happened. The IRS began an audit of Ritter Tulsa based on an anonymous report of possible irregularities. Of course, the anonymous report had been sent by Pamela Hughes at my request. And while there were no serious irregularities, I didn't want to risk criminal prosecution. Even the minimal discrepancies we had created were enough to initiate a long and grueling audit. By the end of the second week, Albus couldn't stand it any longer and drove to the T&L Instruments office in Porterville. Unlike Beverly, he hadn't called ahead of time. He just showed up on the doorstep, exhausted and angry. Cassandra ushered him into my office. When he came in, I deliberately continued working on my paperwork without raising my head. "Impressive," he said, looking around the office. "Less than a month old and you already have a full office, staff, and clients, all built on the ruins of our family company." I finally looked up. "To what do I owe the visit, Albus?" He sank heavily into the chair across from me. "The IRS found irregularities in the accounting. They're threatening a huge fine. Beverly's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. 3 major suppliers are being sued for breach of contract. and the bank has refused to restructure the loan." He was silent for a moment, then added quietly, "The company is dying, Father." "And you came to tell me this news?" I asked. "I came to ask, why?" Albus looked me straight in the eye. "Why did you destroy the company you created? The company that bears your name?" I leaned back in my chair. "And why did you and your sister try to take away everything I had? My company, my home, even my dignity? You threatened to have me declared incompetent, Albus. Send me to a nursing home. You didn't even wait for your mother's body to cool. We just wanted to—" he started, but I interrupted. "You wanted the company without earning it. You thought you were entitled to everything Theodora and I had built up through decades of hard work. Well, you got what you wanted. The company is yours. Run it as you see fit." Albus sat with his head down. "We can't do it. You know that." "Then sell it," I shrugged. "Sure, you'll get a pittance now compared to what the company was worth a month ago, but it's better than bankruptcy." "And if we sell, then what?" he asked quietly. "Then you'll finally face real life," I answered. "You'll get a job, or start your own business from scratch, like your mother and I once did. Either way, it will be a rewarding experience." Albus stood up. "You know, Father, I never thought you were capable of such a cold, calculated revenge. And I never thought my children were capable of such treachery," I parried. "I guess we didn't know each other very well." When he left, I sat staring out the window at the streets of Porterville for a long time. In my mind, I went back 40 years to when Theodora and I had just opened our first store. How we dreamed that one day our children would carry on our business, preserve and grow what we had created. How things turned out differently. But despite the bitterness, I felt a sense of fulfillment. T&L Instruments was thriving. The team was cohesive and motivated. The customers were happy. We had kept the best of Ritter tools, leaving the empty shell to those who didn't appreciate its essence. My revenge is complete, but along with the triumph came the realization that war with my own children had not brought me true happiness, only the satisfaction of justice restored. And perhaps that was all I could hope for. It's been exactly 1 year since I buried Theodora, a year that changed everything. Today, on the anniversary of her death, I decided to take the day off and spend the day alone with my memories. T&L Instruments was thriving. In 12 months, we had not only restored Ritter Tools to its former position, but surpassed it. We opened 3 new stores, expanded our assortment, and launched online sales. Our customer base grew by 30% and our profits almost doubled. I rented a small but cozy house on the outskirts of Porterville. It was nothing fancy, but it sufficed. Unlike the Raton mansion, there were no ghosts of the past here, only the present. In the morning, I went to the cemetery in Raton. For the first time in a long time, I was going to the town where I had lived most of my life. On the way, I couldn't help but notice how the signs on the former Ritter Tulsa stores had changed. It now bore the name Prime Hardware, a chain from a neighboring state that I'd heard had bought the rest of the company from my children for next to nothing. The cemetery greeted me with peace and quiet. I walked the familiar path to Theodora's grave, carrying a bouquet of her favorite white lilies. The tombstone was well cared for. I paid for regular maintenance, though I didn't come myself. "Hello, darling," I said quietly, laying the flowers down. "I'm sorry I haven't visited for so long. It's been difficult." I sat down on the bench next to the grave and began to tell her about everything that had happened this year, about the new company, about how I'd outsmarted the kids, about our successes and plans for the future. He talked for a long time, like he was trying to make up for the months he'd been away. "I don't know if you'd approve of what I did," I finally admitted. "Maybe you'd say I went too far, but I couldn't let them destroy what we'd spent a lifetime building. And I couldn't forgive the betrayal." The wind rustled in the leaves of the trees, as if answering my words. I closed my eyes, imagining Theodora sitting next to me as she had so many times in our 42 years together. Sometimes I wonder where we went wrong with them, I continued more quietly. Maybe we gave them too much. Or, on the contrary, too little attention while we were building the business. I don't know. But whatever the reason, it's too late to change anything now. I sat there for another hour, immersed in memories and reflections. Then I said goodbye to Theodora and headed back to the car. I stopped halfway there when I saw a familiar figure walking down the main avenue of the cemetery. Beverly. She too was carrying flowers, pink roses, which Theodora had never liked, preferring them to lilies. Even in such little things, it showed how little the children knew their mother. She noticed me and paused for a moment, obviously deciding whether to approach or turn around. Finally, taking a deep breath, she headed in my direction. "Father," she nodded, stopping a few feet away. "Beverly," I answered. She looked older than she had a year ago. There were new wrinkles in the corners of her eyes and a few gray strands in her hair. The stylish suit had changed to a more modest outfit. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. "It's the anniversary of your mother's death," I reminded her. "Where else would I be?" Beverly lowered her eyes. "Yes, of course. I decided to come too, for the first time in a long time." "Where's Albus?" I asked, not seeing my son. "He's busy," she answered vaguely. "He had a job interview." "A job interview?" "Yeah. After we sold the company, he had to look for a job, so did I." I remained silent, not wanting to broach the subject here in the cemetery. Beverly, however, continued. "You know, I think every day about what happened, about what Albus and I did, and what you did." "And what conclusions have you come to?" I asked. She grinned bitterly. "That we deserved what we got. But you're no better than we are." "Maybe," I agreed. "The apple from the tree, as they say." We stood there in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. Then Beverly asked, "Are you happy, Father, in your new life, with your new company?" I hesitated to answer. "I don't know if you could call it happiness, but I'm happy. The company is thriving. The people who work with me appreciate what we do. I'm continuing the business I started with your mother. It's, satisfying." Beverly nodded. "I understand." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Albus and I would like to meet you, to have a talk. Not here, of course. Tomorrow, perhaps? Or whenever it's convenient for you." I looked at my daughter carefully. "What do you want to talk about?" "About many things." She didn't meet my gaze. "About the past, about the future, about what we could fix," I finished for her. "I'm afraid some things can't be fixed, Beverly." "I know." She finally looked me in the eye. "But at least we can try to talk, like adults." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the distance we'd established between us. But the other part, the part that still remembered them as children, was curious. "Okay," I said finally. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, at the Riverview Cafe in Porterville." "Thank you." Beverly looked surprised by my agreement. "We'll be there." She walked past me to her mother's grave, and I headed to my car, thinking about the upcoming meeting. I spent the next day in the office, taking care of current affairs and trying not to think about the upcoming conversation with the kids. At 2 o'clock, I arrived at Riverview, a small cafe on the riverbank where I sometimes ate lunch. Albus and Beverly were already waiting for me at a table by the window. They stood up as I approached. Albus held out his hand to shake, a formal gesture that seemed odd between father and son. "Father," he nodded. I shook his hand, noting that he, like Beverly, looked aged. Gone was the swagger that had always been on his face. Now he looked ordinary, tired, a man who had faced reality and lost. We sat down, ordered coffee, and talked for a few minutes about the weather, the city, the usual safe topics. Then Beverly cut to the chase. "Father, we invited you here to talk about a possible reconciliation." I raised an eyebrow. "Reconciliation?" "Yes," Albus interjected. It's been a year. We've all been through a lot, realized a lot. Maybe it's time to move on. And what do you suggest? I asked, sipping my coffee. Beverly exchanged a glance with her brother, then continued. We were thinking, maybe you'd consider bringing us into your company. Not in management positions, of course. We realize we don't deserve it, but at least give us a chance. That's it. They weren't looking for reconciliation, they were looking for a job. A lifeline. What about the money from the sale of Ritter Tulsa? I asked. It should have been enough for a while. Albus lowered his eyes. The company was saddled with debt. After all the payments and fines, there wasn't much left. Plus, Beverly added, Norris made some bad investments. We're on the verge of bankruptcy. I see, I leaned back in my chair. And you decided to come to me. You're our father, Albus looked up. Despite everything that has happened. It's interesting that you only remembered that now, I remarked. Not a year ago, when you tried to take everything away from me and put me in a nursing home. We're sorry about that, Beverly said quietly. We were blinded by greed. It was a terrible thing to do. But you weren't blameless either, Father. What you did to the company. I protected what your mother and I had spent decades building, I interrupted. From you, from her own children, who couldn't wait for her body to cool down so they could start dividing up the inheritance. We know, Albus raised his hand in a conciliatory gesture, and we're not trying to make excuses. Just give us a chance, Father, a chance to redeem ourselves. I looked at them carefully. Did they sound sincere? Or was this another attempt at manipulation? Tell me, I said at last, what exactly happened to Ritter Tulsa after I left? I want to hear the whole story. They looked at each other for a moment, then Beverly began. At first we tried to keep the company afloat, hiring new employees, finding new clients. But without key personnel, without the connections you took with you, it was almost impossible. Then the problems with the IRS started, Albus continued. Fines, penalties. Then came the unfavorable contracts you'd signed before you left. We tried to challenge them, but legally everything was perfect. Banks refused to lend, Beverly said. Investors turned away. Suppliers demanded payment up front. After 6 months, we realized we couldn't avoid bankruptcy. That's when Prime Hardware came along, Albus grinned bitterly. They offered to buy the company for 1/3 of its real value. We tried to bargain, but they knew we were desperate. We ended up selling everything, Beverly finished. The stores, the warehouses, even the name. After all the debts were paid off, we had almost nothing left. Norris tried to invest the leftovers in some startup, but it failed. And then, he left me. I'm sorry, I said, and it was partly true. Despite everything, they were still my kids. Don't be sorry, Albus shook his head. It was our own fault. But now we want to make it right. A fresh start. And we hope you'll give us that chance. I was silent for a long moment, thinking about what they said. Then I said, let me tell you what happened a year ago, from my point of view. I began to tell about how I had noticed their strange behavior at Theodora's funeral, about the warning she had left me before she died, about how I had gradually become aware of their plans. I told of the conversation with Christian, of the secret meetings with the staff, of the creation of T&L instruments. Everything I've done, I concluded, has been about preserving what your mother and I have built, the spirit of the company, its values. All you wanted was the shell, the name, the money. You didn't realize that the true value was in the people, the relationships, the reputation. And that's what I saved. At the cost of our ruin, Beverly said quietly. At the cost of justice, I corrected. You got exactly what you deserved, no more, no less. And now? Albus asked. Are you denying us a chance at redemption? I looked at them, my children, sitting in front of me with their heads down, losing all their former self-confidence. Part of me wanted to help them, to give them this chance. But the other part, the more rational part, realized it would be a mistake. "I can't take you to T&L Instruments," I said finally. "Not after everything that's happened. The people who work with me trust me. I can't betray their trust by bringing you into the company." They both flinched when they heard the word betray. Beverly started to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. "But I can help you in other ways. I'll give you money enough to start your own business. A small one, of course. You'll have to build it yourself from scratch, like your mother and I once did." "Money?" Albus looked surprised. "But we didn't come for—" "I know," I interrupted. "You wanted a place in my company, but I'm offering you something more valuable, a chance to prove that you've learned something, that you can create something on your own, not just destroy what others have created." Beverly looked at me with a mixture of resentment and hope. "And you think we can do that?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It's up to you, but at least you'll have a chance to try." "And in return?" Albus asked suspiciously. "What do you want from us?" I shook my head. "Nothing. This isn't a deal. It's the last gift of parenthood. Use it wisely." We agreed on the details. I promised to transfer the money into their accounts within a week. They promised to carefully consider what kind of business they wanted to start. We exchanged contacts for the first time in a year and parted in a strange, uncertain state. Not friends, but no longer enemies. When I got home in the evening, I sat on the veranda for a long time, looking at the sunset and reflecting on the meeting. I felt neither joy nor regret, only a quiet acceptance of what had happened and what might yet happen. Perhaps the children had learned their lesson. Perhaps they didn't. Either way, I did what I could, both to protect the legacy created with Theodora and to give them a chance to start over. The next day, I went back to work. T&L Instruments continued to grow and evolve. We opened new stores, expanded our product line, and implemented modern technology. I felt satisfaction in seeing the business started with Theodora flourish. Sometimes, sitting in my office, I would pull out an old photo of us standing at the entrance to the first Ritter Tulsa store, young, full of hope and enthusiasm. "We did it, Theodora," I said quietly, looking at her smiling face. "We kept what we created. Maybe not in the way we planned, maybe not with the people we had hoped for, but the essence remained the same. And it seemed to me that somewhere, in some other dimension, she was smiling upon hearing those words." As for Albus and Beverly, I gave them the promised money and stepped back, letting them decide their own fate. Once in a while, I'd get discreet messages from them. They'd opened a small organic food store. Things were going fine. Not brilliant, but not failing. They were learning to live in the real world, without a silver spoon in their mouths. I didn't feel the same old resentment or special love for them. Just a quiet acceptance that some relationships cannot be completely repaired. Sometimes the cracks are too deep to mend, but one can learn to live with them, recognizing their existence. The revenge I carried out a year ago gave me the satisfaction of justice restored. But the real satisfaction I found was not in that, but in continuing the work of my and Theodora's entire life, in working with people who shared our values and vision, in creating something meaningful and lasting. Every morning when I arrived at the T&L Instruments office, I would see the T in the company name and think of Theodora. And I knew she would approve of what I had done. Not revenge, she'd always been kinder than I was, but preserving what we'd built together. The spirit, not just the form. The essence, not just the name. In the end, that was what was most important. Not the buildings, not the signage, not the numbers on the bank accounts. It was the people, the values, the traditions. What Theodora and I had invested in our company for 40 years. What I've managed to preserve despite the betrayal of my own children. And that, I think, was my real victory.